The dinner rush was in full swing, and the kitchen buzzed with energy. Plates clattered, flames roared, and the rich aroma of spices filled the air. Malik had been working at this high-end restaurant for years, pouring his heart into every dish he prepared. Cooking wasn't just a job for him, it was his passion, his art. Every plate that left his station was a masterpiece, crafted with precision and love. Customers raved about his food, and many regulars came back just for the flavors he created. But despite his hard work, something felt off that night. The head chef, Damien, had been watching him closely, whispering to the restaurant owner in hushed tones. Malik brushed it off, focusing on his dishes, but a sinking feeling settled in his chest. As the night came to an end, Malik was called into the office. He wiped his hands on his apron, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. The owner, Mr. Reynolds, sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. Damien stood beside him, arms crossed. Malik's heart pounded. He knew something was wrong. "Malik," Mr. Reynolds said, his voice flat, "we're letting you go." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. "What? Why?" Malik asked, his voice shaking. He had never been late, never slacked off, and always gave his best. There was no reason for this. Mr. Reynolds sighed, avoiding his gaze. "We just decided to go in a different direction," he said vaguely. Damien smirked slightly, but said nothing. Malik clenched his fists, anger and confusion swirling inside him. "Is this about my cooking? The customers love my food. I've never had a complaint." Mr. Reynolds shook his head. "It's not about that." Malik searched their faces for an answer, but none came. He had worked tirelessly, given his all, and in return, he was being tossed aside without an explanation. He wanted to argue, to demand a real reason, but he could see it in their eyes. His fate was already decided. With a heavy heart, he removed his apron and placed it on the desk. He walked out of the office, past the kitchen where he had spent years perfecting his craft, past his coworkers who whispered in hushed voices. Stepping out into the cold night, Malik felt lost. What was he supposed to do now? Cooking was everything to him. How would he start over? The next few weeks were brutal. No restaurant in town seemed to be hiring, and the ones that were didn't even give him a callback. He applied everywhere, but doors kept shutting in his face. His savings dwindled, and the stress of unemployment weighed heavily on him. Nights were spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why this had happened. Was it something he did? Something he didn't do? One evening, while scrolling through job listings with no luck, Malik got a message from an old friend, Andrew. "Hey man, heard what happened. I got something you might be interested in. Call me." Malik hesitated. He hadn't spoken to Andrew in a while, but he was out of options. He dialed the number, and Andrew picked up on the first ring. "Malik, my guy, how you been?" "Not great," Malik admitted. "I need work, man, anything." Andrew chuckled. "I might have just the thing, but it's a little different from what you're used to." Malik frowned. "Different how?" "Meet me tomorrow. I'll explain everything then." Malik had no idea what to expect, but at this point, he had nothing to lose. The next morning, he met Andrew at a small cafe on the other side of town. Andrew grinned as Malik sat down. "All right, hear me out," he said, leaning in. "What if I told you that getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to you?" Malik raised an eyebrow. "You better have a good reason for saying that." Andrew smirked. "Trust me, bro. You're about to find out." Malik stirred his coffee, eyeing Andrew suspiciously. "All right, man. Enough with the suspense. What's this big opportunity you're talking about?" Andrew leaned forward, his voice low. "You ever thought about starting your own thing?" Malik scoffed, shaking his head. Man, I just lost my job. I can't even get hired anywhere, and you're talking about starting something. With what money? Andrew grinned. You don't need much. Just your skills and a little faith. Listen, I've been working with a guy who helps people set up food businesses, like pop-up spots, food trucks, even private catering. There's a whole market out there, and I know for a fact people would pay good money for your food. Malik sighed, rubbing his temples. Sounds great, but I don't even know where to start. And let's be real. I don't have the connections these big-name chefs do. I'm just some guy who got fired. Andrew's expression turned serious. You're not just some guy, Malik. You're one of the best chefs I know. And trust me, people will recognize that. You don't need a fancy restaurant to prove it. Malik wanted to believe him, but doubt still gnawed at him. He had spent years climbing the ranks in the restaurant world, only to be tossed aside like he was nothing. The idea of starting over from scratch was overwhelming. But at the same time, what other option did he have? No one was hiring him, and sitting around waiting for an opportunity wasn't going to change anything. Andrew pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. I know a guy who rents out commercial kitchens for cheap. You could start small, maybe do catering or sell plates on the weekends. Test the waters. Malik hesitated. And what if it doesn't work? Andrew shrugged. Then at least you tried. But what if it does? What if this is the thing that changes everything? That question stuck with Malik long after they left the cafe. He spent the next few days thinking about it, running through every excuse in his head. But in the end, one thought kept coming back to him. He loved to cook. It wasn't just a job to him, it was who he was. And if no one was willing to give him a chance, maybe it was time to create his own. With Andrew's help, Malik found a small shared kitchen space and started planning his menu. He kept it simple. Dishes he knew people loved, flavors that told a story. At first, it was just word of mouth, friends and family placing orders. Then Andrew convinced him to post about it online. Social media had a way of making things go viral, and Malik figured it couldn't hurt. To his surprise, the response was immediate. People remembered his cooking from the restaurant and were eager to support him. Orders started coming in, and soon Malik was cooking nonstop. The kitchen became his second home again, the stress of chopping, stirring, and plating feeling more like a thrill than a burden. But not everyone was happy about his success. One night, as he was packing up after a long day, he got a message from an unknown number. You think you can just start your own thing and take business from us. Stay in your lane. Malik frowned, staring at the screen. He had no idea who sent it, but he had a pretty good guess. Damien. He hadn't thought about his former head chef in weeks, but now it seemed like Damien hadn't forgotten about him. And judging by the message, he wasn't too happy about Malik making a name for himself outside of the restaurant. Malik showed the message to Ender, who just laughed. That dude's scared, he said. You're proving you never needed them in the first place, and that's a threat to guys like him. Malik wanted to brush it off, but a bad feeling settled in his gut. Damien had always been arrogant, but he was also the type to play dirty when he felt threatened. Malik had no idea what he was capable of, but he had a feeling he was about to find out. Malik tried to shake off the message, telling himself it was just an empty threat. But deep down, he knew Damien wasn't the type to let things go. The restaurant industry was cutthroat, and some people would do anything to protect their reputation. Still, Malik refused to let fear slow him down. Orders were coming in faster than ever, and his pop-up events were drawing attention from food bloggers and influencers. It felt like, for the first time in a long time, things were finally falling into place. But then strange things started happening. One night, after locking up the kitchen, Malik noticed his car tires had been slashed. He stood there, staring at the deep cuts in the rubber, his jaw tightening. Andra had to pick him up that night, and neither of them said much on the drive home. A few days later, a health inspector showed up at the kitchen unannounced. Malik's heart pounded as the man walked through the space, clipboard in hand, taking notes and shaking his head. Someone filed a complaint, the inspector said. Said you were operating under unsanitary conditions. Malik's stomach dropped. He prided himself on keeping everything spotless. He knew for a fact there was nothing wrong with the kitchen. But complaints like this could shut him down, and he had a good idea who was behind it. The inspector found nothing wrong, but the warning was clear. Someone wanted Malik out of business. Andrew was furious. This dude is playing dirty. Man, you need to do something. Malik clenched his fists. Like what? Go to the police and say my old boss is trying to sabotage me. They won't take me seriously until something worse happens. Andrew shook his head. Then we hit back in a way he won't see coming. We go bigger. Malik hesitated. He had been planning to grow the business slowly, one step at a time. But now he realized he couldn't afford to play it safe. He needed to get ahead of Damien before things got worse. So he took a risk.